Snowflakes floated like tiny diamonds against the New York skyline, the kind of winter night where couples held hands on sidewalks and families huddled together under glowing street lamps. But for Alexander Reed, the city might as well have been a desert, glittering, loud, alive, yet completely empty. Alexander was 42 years old, a man whose name echoed through the corridors of Wall Street, whose face graced the cover of Forbes and Fortune, whose business empire stretched across continents. He had everything the world told him he should want. And yet, when the evening came and his chauffeured car delivered him to the towering glass penthouse he called home, silence greeted him at the door like a ghost he couldn't shake off. Every night followed the same pattern. He would hang his coat, walk past the marble floors polished to a shine, and glance at the long dining table set for 12, but forever empty. He would pour himself a drink, whiskey neat, sink into the leather chair by the window, and watch the city lights blink in patterns he no longer cared to decipher. To anyone else, it looked like success. To him, it was nothing but loneliness wrapped in gold. Alexander's marriage had dissolved 5 years earlier, suffocated by his endless pursuit of power and prestige. His wife had begged him for more time, more presence, more love. But the company always came first. By the time he realized what he had lost, it was too late. She'd walked away, leaving him with nothing but empty rooms and a quiet ache he drowned in work. They had never had children, and now, at 42, the dream of family seemed like something that belonged to another life entirely. His employees respected him. Investors feared him. The media admired him, but no one truly knew him. And deep inside, Alexander wasn't sure he even knew himself anymore. On this particular December night, the cold wind cut sharper than usual as he stepped out of his office building. The streets shimmered with Christmas decorations, store windows bursting with reds and greens, families rushing by with shopping bags, children laughing as they tugged at their parents' hands. He envied them without admitting it, a pang in his chest he quickly brushed aside. He pulled his coat tighter and crossed toward his waiting car. That's when he noticed her. A small figure sat on the park bench across the street. Too small to be alone at this hour. She couldn't have been more than 6. A wool hat slipped sideways on her head, her jacket thin and frayed, her little shoes dusted with snow. She clutched a teddy bear, so worn its stuffing peeked out at the seams. Alexander paused mid-step. In another life, maybe he would have walked past. He had done it countless times before, seen people in need, and reminded himself he had no time, no space, no room in his ordered life for strangers. But tonight, something tugged at him. Maybe it was the way her big brown eyes glistened under the street lamp, or the way her tiny body shivered against the winter wind. Or maybe it was because, for once, he was tired of going home to silence. Against all instinct, he crossed the street. When he drew near, the little girl tightened her grip on the teddy and scooted slightly away. She looked at him warily, as if unsure whether he was friend or foe. Alexander crouched down to meet her eyes. "Hey," he said softly, his deep voice gentler than he expected. "Are you lost?" She shook her head, strands of hair falling across her forehead. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "No." He frowned. "Where's your mom, your dad?" Her lip trembled. She hugged the teddy tighter, pressing her face into its worn fur before answering, "Mommy's in heaven now." The words hit him like a blade. He opened his mouth, then closed it, unsure what to say. "And your dad?" he pressed gently. Her little shoulders slumped. She shook her head again, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't have a papa." She hesitated, looked at him with such raw, desperate innocence that his chest ached, and whispered, Can you be my daddy forever?" Alexander froze. Of all the things she could have said, that was the last he expected. A man who made billion-dollar decisions every day, who signed contracts that determined the fate of thousands of employees, suddenly found himself speechless before a 6-year-old girl with snow in her hair. For a long moment, He simply stared at her, his throat tight, his heart thundering. Something inside him cracked wide open, a flood of emotions he had kept buried for years. Loneliness, regret, longing, all of it surged at once. And in that fragile moment, he realized that this little girl wasn't asking for money or shelter or food. She was asking for love. His voice faltered, he swallowed hard. I don't know if I can be your daddy. Her face fell instantly and she looked down, clutching the teddy as if bracing for another rejection. The sight tore him apart. But, he added quickly, forcing a steadier tone, I can get you somewhere warm. You shouldn't be out here alone. She peeked up at him, uncertain, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. Slowly she reached out her small hand and placed it in his. And just like that, something shifted in Alexander Reed. The man who had everything but nothing at all, who had lived in shadows of loneliness for years, felt the first spark of connection in a very long time. He led her across the street to a small diner still open, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and a neon sign buzzing faintly in the cold. The warmth hit them as they entered, the smell of coffee and pancakes wrapping around them. Alexander guided her to a booth and sat across from her. A waitress approached, eyeing the unusual pair, a sharp, suited man with a little girl clutching a teddy bear. Alexander cleared his throat. 2 hot chocolates, he said. After a moment he added, and pancakes, with syrup, lots of it. The little girl's eyes brightened just a little. When the food arrived, she devoured the pancakes with a hunger that made his chest ache. He let her eat in silence for a while, watching the way she carefully balanced bites with sips of hot chocolate, as though savoring each taste like it was a treasure. Finally, when she slowed, he asked gently, "What's your name?" She licked syrup from her fingers and murmured, "Emily." "That's a beautiful name," Alexander said softly. "Emily, do you have any family? Anyone looking after you?" Her shoulders hunched. "I stayed with Aunt Marissa for a while, but she said I was too much trouble. Then I stayed with Uncle Pete, but he drinks a lot and forgets about me." She looked down, twisting the teddy bear's ear between her fingers. "Nobody really wants me." Something inside Alexander broke at those words. He had been abandoned too, in his own way, not by death or relatives, but by love, by family, by his own choices. He knew what it felt like to come home to emptiness, to feel unwanted. And hearing those same words from a child cut deeper than any business failure ever could. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Emily, I don't know what the future holds, but tonight you're not alone. Do you understand?" She looked up at him, her eyes wet but shining with a fragile hope. Will you stay, even after tonight?" He hesitated, the weight of her question pressing into him. A man who had never once allowed his heart to make decisions found himself at a crossroads. "I'll stay," he said finally, his voice steady this time. "I promise." Emily smiled for the first time that night. A small, trembling smile, but one that lit up her entire face. And in that moment, Alexander Reed, the lonely CEO who thought he had everything, realized he had just taken the first step toward the one thing he had always been missing. Alexander guided Emily out of the diner and into his waiting car. She hesitated at first, glancing around as if afraid someone would drag her back to the cold streets. But when his driver opened the door and Alexander gave her a reassuring nod, she climbed inside, clutching her teddy tightly. The city blurred past the windows, Christmas lights twinkling in the distance, but Emily's tired eyes soon began to droop. By the time they reached his penthouse, she had fallen asleep against the leather seat. For years, Alexander's home had been nothing but polished marble, cold glass, and silence. But carrying Emily through the doorway that night, he felt something shift. She stirred awake and her eyes widened at the grand staircase, the sparkling chandelier above, and the massive windows overlooking Central Park. "Is this the castle?" she whispered. Alexander smiled faintly. "Something like that." He led her to a guest bedroom, tucked her in, and for the first time in years sat at someone's bedside until they drifted into peaceful sleep. Before closing her eyes, she whispered, "You'll still be here in the morning, right?" His throat tightened. "I will," he promised. And for once, Alexander Reed kept a promise that had nothing to do with business. The following days transformed his world. Mornings that used to begin with conference calls now began with Emily tugging at his sleeve, asking for pancakes. Boardrooms were replaced with afternoons in the park, her mittened hand wrapped around his. She colored on his office paperwork, drew flowers and rainbows on contracts worth millions, and turned the echoing halls of his penthouse into playgrounds of laughter. For the first time, Alexander discovered joy in the simplest things. Hearing her giggle as he burnt toast, watching her fall asleep during cartoons, listening to her tiny voice call him Daddy without hesitation. But happiness is never without shadows. One morning, two stern officials from Child Services arrived. They had questions. Why was Emily living here? Did he have custody? What made him think a billionaire CEO could provide the nurturing environment a child needed? Emily clung to his arm, her small voice trembling. "Please don't let them take me, Daddy." The word pierced through him. Daddy. It wasn't a title he had earned, but it was one he desperately wanted. That night, Alexander sat awake by the fireplace, memories flooding back. His own father, wealthy, powerful, but distant, had never tucked him in, never asked about his day, never made him feel wanted. He had grown up in a house full of everything except love, and he realized he could not let Emily suffer the same fate. The battle soon moved to court. The gallery buzzed with reporters, intrigued by the story of a billionaire fighting for an orphan. The state's lawyer argued logically. Alexander was too busy, too inexperienced, and far too powerful to give Emily a normal childhood. She would be better off in foster care, they claimed. But when it was his turn, Alexander rose. Not as a CEO, not as a businessman, but as a man whose heart had been awakened. "I won't pretend I know everything about being a father," he admitted, voice unsteady but sincere. "I don't know how to braid hair. I've never packed a school lunch. I can't name every bedtime song. But I do know this. This little girl asked me to be her daddy forever, and I will not break that promise. I've built empires, yes. I've made fortunes, yes. But none of it matters if I let her feel unwanted. Money can build a house. Only love can make it a home, and I swear I will love her every day of my life." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge seemed moved. During recess, Emily squeezed his hand and whispered, "You're already the best daddy. I don't need anyone else." When the verdict came, the judge's voice carried both authority and warmth. "This court grants guardianship of Emily Grace to Mr. Alexander Reed." The room erupted in murmurs, but Alexander heard nothing except Emily's joyful cry as she ran into his arms. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered the words that had first changed his life. "I told you, you're my daddy forever." From that day forward, Alexander's world was never the same. His calendar no longer revolved around stock prices and business trips. It revolved around bedtime stories, piano recitals, Sunday ice cream dates, and handwritten notes that read, "I love you, Daddy." Years later, at Emily's graduation, Alexander sat in the front row, pride swelling in his chest as she crossed the stage. She caught his eye, smiled, and silently mouthed the word she had promised him years ago, forever. And in that moment, Alexander Reed, once the loneliest CEO in New York, understood the greatest truth of his life. The most important title he would ever hold was not billionaire, not visionary, not CEO. It was the simplest, most powerful title of all. Daddy.